There are elements of the party that are sadly racist.
Woke social media more is effectively capturing the party. They mean well, of course, but their politics, obsessed with identity, division, and tech utopianism, have more in common with those of Californian high society.
Did you ever meet someone like that who would come in for 5 pints and then go home to a wife and 3 screaming kids that would care about pronouns? Hello. Welcome to the Dissonance Trap, where we will once again be discussing some topical, controversial, and challenging subject matters that are designed to induce cognitive dissonance.
You're here with myself, Gav, my good friend Josh, and we're going to be delving deep into the absurdities of modern British politics today.
Oh, so, like when I think Labour, right, what I lament what it has become. That's where it comes. It's like they are the only thing that I could closely relate to in that politics. I joined the party.
Yeah, you were a member, weren't you?
I was a member. I joined for Comrade Corbyn. I joined for Comrade Corbyn. And yeah, it did. And when I see the state of the party now, I lament. So the recent elections, well, let's just start with a little bit of facts. Yeah, so okay. Labour have just lost Durham County, which they've held since 1925, right? The Conservatives got a total of 2,346 seats. That's a change of plus 294.
Okay.
Labour have a total seats of 1,344 with a change of minus 267.
So they've basically just handed all their seats to the Conservatives.
Yeah. And what I think sums this up is the Labour MP, which we've discussed a little bit already, Khalid Mahmood, who, okay, and I've written down his quote here. And this is what I think we can center our talk around today. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Quote, this is what he said after he resigned from the party.
Resigned? I didn't know that. Okay.
So he's still in the party, but he resigned from the shadow leaf maker or something, right? So here's what he said. A London-based bourgeoisie with the support of brigades of woke social media warriors has effectively captured the party. They mean well, of course, but their politics, obsessed with identity, division, and even tech utopianism, have more in common with those of Californian high society than the kind of people who voted in Hartlepool yesterday. The loudest voices in the Labour movement over the past years, in particular, have focused more on pulling down Churchill's statue than they have on helping people pull themselves up in the world. A bit of superficial flag waving, reinforced by urgent memos from party HQ, isn't going to fix that. And he finished with this. We fix that by supporting jobs in these so-called left behind areas with changes to public procurement, for example, that bring jobs back to the UK and support manufacturing jobs, including those in high tech, advance and manufacturing. What do you think of that?
Well, it's interesting that it comes from an actual Labour former shadow cabinet member, isn't it? That
still an MP though.
Yeah, I do find that interesting. But I think before we sort of go any further, really, we should sort of make clear that Mahmood is what you would call a Blairite, isn't he? So he's from the side of the party.
He's more centrist, definitely.
Well, yeah, but he's from the side of the party that essentially supports the Blair-style policies of a sort of government that can be seen in the media to be business-friendly and can be seen to be on the side of the working man in the traditional sort of sense that we see the Tories classify the working man. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I suppose in a way that comment that I've given there it explains half the problem with Labour, isn't it? The fact that they're divided into these camps of left and I would probably say centre-right, to be honest with you, with some of their groups. I think Mahmood makes some good points when he talks about the London-based bourgeoisie, and I think by that he means what we would call, or what me and you would call, the predatory governing class. So the metropolitan elite that live inside the M25 that really have very little understanding of the wider country as a whole. I think that is quite important because it shows the disconnect and the dissonance within the Labour Party as to what their own voters actually want. And we've obviously talked a lot about Brexit over the years, and we're probably going to delve into that today. It's something we haven't really covered a lot, but it's something that Labour have failed to understand, isn't it? That actually, despite the £1 trillion or so that have left the UK, and despite the chaos for business that Brexit is causing, it is generally supported by a significant number of the electorate. And it's not supported because they hate brown people. I mean, some of them probably don't like foreigners too much, but I don't think that's the main thing. The main thrust of the support of Brexit comes from the fact that people feel completely alienated from their politicians, and they definitely feel completely alienated from Labour. But that in itself, it goes on to a completely separate question as well, doesn't it? I mean, it shows, how did the Conservatives sell Brexit? I mean, we're going off on a complete tangent. I'm going to go back to Mahmoud's quote now. He said that...
we'll come back to Brexit.
Yeah, I've got his quote here, actually. And he says that woke social media more is effectively capturing the party. They mean well, of course, but their politics, obsessed with identity, division, and tech utopianism, have more in common with those of Californian high society than the kind of people who voted in Hartlepool. Now, this is a really good assessment, because this is the world that we live in now. Because of the way that the internet and free market capitalism, late stage capitalism, has developed, this is essentially what these people believe. And it's what people, to be honest, in the Tory party believe as well, although they approach it in a different way. And the way they've approached it is in an electioneering way. So they have the media on side, is what I'm trying to say, I guess, here, is that the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, they are both neoliberal parties. But the difference is the Tories, they understand how to push their narrative, and the media lap it up, because the media are part of this London-based bourgeoisie. They are part of this sort of style of Californian high society. So it's in their interest to keep supporting the governing party. You see what Keir Starmer tried to do, and he's tried to spin himself as a Blair-style leader. But the problem is he's using ideas which really haven't quite caught on yet, and they might have caught on in some sort of the say Podemos and some of the more left-leaning parties in Europe. They've absorbed these ideas, but to be honest, they haven't done very well in the latest elections either. So we could say that this is an example of the knee-jerk reaction of the general population to the fear of the unknown. Think of the quote from the Marxist thinker, the Irishman Frederick Jameson, who said that it is easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And I think these elections are a really interesting example of that thought process, because Labour under Corbyn, when they offered something that was moving towards the end of capitalism, they actually did quite well. If you look at the votes gained by Labour under Corbyn in comparison to the votes lost under Keir Starmer, Corbyn actually did really well.
Until 2019, when he got absolutely wrecked.
I think I would disagree there, because although he didn't, it's not.
That's when the red rule started crumbling, though.
But it's not
Corbyn.
Quite that simple, though, is it? Because if you look at the way that the first past the post system works, they didn't really lose that many votes. They just lost votes in the places where it really counted. So in the places where there was a small majority and the Conservatives could win by targeting those areas, they did so, and they did so very effectively, because they had a very good election manager in Dominic Cummings. He's a very intelligent man, this Dominic Cummings, despite people's hatred of him.
Under Corbyn, they lost some Labour seats that they held for 100 years. In 2017
they had a huge gain.
Oh, that's 2017 though. That's old.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that in 2019 is they didn't lose those votes. They simply the seats they lost were in areas where the Tories had targeted them for election.
But that's losing. That is.
But it's
dress it up how you like.
You can't just say, "Oh, that's because of Corbyn." Like you're sounding.
No. I don't mean it like that. No. It's not just because of Corbyn, but it is arguably down to their policy.
It's not about policy. I don't think it's about.
I think it is a bit. If you're saying we're going to give you all free internet, and then you had that internet company call him up, who was talking.
But it's going to happen. Yeah, but it's going to happen, man. It's same with universal basic income. We always talk about UBI, don't we, as a really good idea. And it is a good idea, because essentially we got fiat currency and we print money, don't we? So a Corbyn style government would have 100% gravitated towards universal basic income, and the Tories gave us universal basic income in the form of a furlough. Yeah. So what's happening is, I'm just trying to find an article, man, because there's an article that I read recently which literally explains this, and it's the fact that the traditional ideas of left and right in this country are breaking down. Oh, I've just found it now. Yeah. So this is a quote from a Guardian article, and I'll just read it quickly in full, and then you can launch into a counter takeover. Yeah. So Dominic Cummings made this point very explicitly in discussing the behavioural science underpinning his Brexit campaign. There are two dimensions. One focused on economic policies such as welfare and income equality, nationalising industries and the deficit, and the other on social matters such as immigration, minority rights, and crime and punishment. Understanding this distinction was key to the Leave campaign winning the EU referendum. It pivoted, i.e. the Tories pivoted to the left on economics. So they promised money for the NHS, they gave us furlough, etc. We saw sort of left-wing ideas here. They probably will give us free broadband. And he goes on to say, but they pivoted to the right on social issues, for example, by opposing free movement. I think this is key here. The Tories are taking the best bits of the current paradigm, or what they think are the best bits, and sort of cobbling it together into an idea of government. The problem I have with this is they're not implementing it. They might say they do these things, but I don't know.
They have done furlough. They have.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, but the only reason they did furlough was to stop the economy collapsing. So there's a hidden agenda.
But still, you've got to give them that, Gav. You can't say they're not implementing it, and then they do implement it, and then you give them a reason why.
But it's the easiest thing to implement for them because they're just printing money. That's just what I mean. They're not going to nationalize the NHS. They're not going to nationalize the rail service unless it breaks down, and they absolutely have to. They're not going to do these things. This is a government with. Yeah. It would literally just it's a government by media. Like, it's all done through media, man. They don't actually really do anything. And I think the total inaction of Brexit, I mean, what's actually £1 trillion has left the country. And
we're probably going off. Sorry, because I think we were going off.
It's all part of the analysis, though, because this is why Labour has such a difficult time providing any sort of opposition under Corbyn. And what they've done under Starmer is they've just done nothing. They've done a year of infighting and nothing.
They have. So if we take it back to like what Mahmood said about the difference between the Tories and Labour, as I see it right now, is that Labour are obsessed with identity, whereas Tories are taking the best bits of Labour's policy, or like definitely a socially left fiscal policy. Like if you look at Rishi Sunak's new budget, it's actually quite good, and that's how they're winning the voters. So are
you sure they're not obsessed with identity as well, though? Because they're also portraying a different type of identity. They're both sides are playing the culture war. It's what it's there for. It's divide and rule, isn't it?
Well, I'd say they're more obsessed with tradition.
But but isn't that identity as well? Because the idea.
Well, it is definitely,
isn't it? So the culture war is.
But it's a safe bet, isn't it? Traditionalism over
gender
pronouns.
Yeah.
Let me just say something here, and this will make sense in a minute, because I think we're fairly similar here. That we've both worked jobs that are either hard labour. Like at farms, I've done chopping wood all day, digging holes for me old man, bar work.
Yeah, I used to work on
waitering, and I know you have as well. I've worked with working class people in a consultative capacity via the job I've done in job centres, probation officers, and working links. And I was born into a council estate in Weston-super-Mare. It still as run down as it was then. My old man started off pushing a broom around Iceland. Before working his way up. So like traditionally, I'm from a working class background, and both me old dear and old man were Labour voters who wanted better rights for workers. Where this comes from, I mentioned at the start of this, I am so disappointed by the left. And the reason I don't need to moan quite as much about the right isn't because I like them or prefer them or think they're better. It's because we already know where the right are going wrong and are like embarrassing in their own way. And what annoys me is the left should know better and have a semblance of the moral high ground to be able to enact what they want to do. So I'm a rational centrist, and I do lean fiscally left and perhaps maybe socially a bit right, or traditionally more a bit right. But that's what it comes down to. And I'm vexed and embarrassed to say I'm a former Labour member who was canvassing the doorsteps, like lying to working class families that Labour had their best interests at heart. And I was like incensed by Corbyn, like the cult of Corbyn, if you want to call it. So, and we'll put it in a different way. So when you join something and quickly realise it isn't actually the party for the working classes, you're going to get disheartened. So the working classes now, I see them, and this all ties in with Brexit. It ties in with what Mahmoud's saying. They're disposable, and they're not politically correct enough to do the job.
They're disposable for both sides.
They're definitely disposable. And let's not forget Boris Johnson, who called the working classes
feckless, and he basically said we're all scumbags.
He said something bad, so we can't forget that either. But the bars I worked in, we had tradesmen, carpet fitters, plumbers, electricians, builders. Did you ever meet someone like that who would come in for 5 pints and then go home to a wife and 3 screaming kids that would care about pronouns?
No,
all call for gender neutral toilets. So when we look at Labour's policy, some of that stuff is at the top, and that's where that identity obsessed part comes from. Are like the hardworking, decent people like that really supposed to vote for Labour when they have people like Emily Thornberry in the party trying to make a big deal out of someone flying 3 English flags during the World Cup out of their home? She later resigned over that.
I don't remember that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that was a big one in Rochfield. She went there and she sort of put up a Twitter post with 3 flags going, hardly any writing on it, but just like pointing it out. And then all the comments below it, all, scum and all that. I can respect that she's probably a good like local MP for her constituents, but are the working classes really going to vote for a party with someone saying things like, and I got some quotes here, like Diane Abbott? How can you get some builders and stuff like that to vote for someone who says something like this? I suppose, and I quote, I suppose that some people would judge that on balance, Chairman Mao did more good than harm. Right? What? So I'll give you another one. Imagine this. Let's convince the working classes. Yeah, you should vote for this person who said this. The people who complain about freedom of movement will not be satisfied because what they want to see is less foreign-looking people on the streets, and that's not going to happen. Oh, yeah, I'm going to vote for Labour when you basically just called me a racist.
Who said that?
Diane Abbott. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, like I said, Diane Abbott is a great local MP, has represented her constituents for 30 plus years, and I respect that. But I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes. Like, what about the time she said white people love playing divide and rule? We should not play the game. Oh, is that going to make you want to vote for them? I don't think so.
Interestingly, she is playing that game. That comment is filled with dissonance, isn't it? Because that's the game they're playing, is divide and rule, is because that's the game that all politicians play ultimately. This is what this new cult of identitarian wokeist elitism is, isn't it? It is divide and rule, because what they're trying to do is get the youngsters on board, isn't it? And it's a trendy new thing, isn't it? It's supported by the corporations, and I mean, it makes the corporations money, man. These culture wars are covered by the media as like a sort of circus, isn't it? It's all part of the political circus. So it's advantageous to both Labour and the Tories to talk about culture wars a lot. I mean, we're talking about it now, so we're in a way we're also part of the problem.
True,
it already exists, doesn't it? And it's you go to places like Poland now, or Russia, and there are now anti-LGBT zones, aren't there, where people are not allowed to be gay in these areas, or you go to jail, or worse, you get attacked and beaten. And that's completely wrong, but it's a result of the left-leaning political parties attempting to enforce a elitist view of the world on people who aren't there yet. You've got to think back to traditional values. It takes time for our society. It's something we've discussed before, hasn't it? It takes time for a society to transition from a mechanical solidarity to an organic solidarity. And we're in this transitional period now, and we don't know where we're going to end up, but they're trying to control the narrative. Both left and right are going to try and control the narrative and direct us towards either one of these extremes, or either going towards the flying the rainbow flag with goose stepping, or flying some other flag with goose stepping, isn't it? That's what it boils down to. It's totalitarianism by any means. And I think it's because this all goes down to what Khalid Mahmoud said. I mean, in our example, it's a London-based bourgeoisie, but in other countries, it'll be a different type of bourgeoisie. But it's the same sort of thing, where a small group of very powerful people want to keep their hand on the rudder of society, and they're using every tool at their disposal to do so. And one of these tools is the culture war.
I just think politicians know better, and especially the Labour Party. It's like, come on, if you want to hold yourself up and be the moral high ground, you've got to stop playing this game. I'll give you another example. example, privately educated MP Neil Coyle, right? He's a Labour MP. So,
Okay,
and
I've
he
not heard
said,
of this guy, but all right,
well,
that's fine.
he said in a tweet, I have spent years warning local people that these fat old racists won't stop blaming the EU when their shit hits the fan. Here they come blaming others. Absolute shitbag wankers. That is someone who wants you to vote for them. And
Yeah,
he's talking about people who voted Brexit. So I wonder if he felt the same way about his beloved Corbyn when he was anti-EU and proclaimed that he hoped the UK would have their own referendum and that the Irish should reject the Lisbon Treaty and like this notion of a European empire. I wonder if he was against Corbyn when he said that. And a Corbyn who like wisely predicted that when he was talking to these Irish people, he said, don't destroy your posters too soon because the EU are going to keep making you vote until you get the right vote. So he like prophetic.
Yeah, Corbyn's interesting with Brexit, isn't he? Because he didn't come down on a side, did he? He tried
That's the problem.
That's the problem, isn't it? And I think I didn't used to think this, but having spent some time chatting with you, having done some analysis on this, it's true, isn't it? He actually probably supported Brexit ultimately because as a socialist, he believed we could forge our own socialist destiny outside of the European Union. And I think he would have probably done a lot better had he simply been honest with himself and his party. But this goes back to the civil war, isn't it, in the Labour Party, where they're incapable of reaching a compromise, even with each other now. The infighting is really strong. I do actually know someone who was a relatively recent Labour Party member, and she said that one of the first meetings she went to, within about half an hour, it descended into a shouting match between the two factions. Because even at local level, well, yeah, you said this, didn't you? Even at local level, the factionalization of the party is quite severe, and this isn't going to win them elections, is there?
Exactly. It's terrible election policy.
All the Tories are going to do, they're going to become the one party state because they're, like you said, they're going to take the good economic ideas, they're going to rebrand them as their own, they're going to keep hammering away with the media narrative of traditionalism, and people are just going to lap it up because they're scared. They can see that the temperature is rising year on year, they can see that money is becoming worthless, petrol prices are increasing, we've got a fucking coronavirus pandemic, we've got mass shootings, we've got terrorist attacks. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And people in this environment gravitate towards safety, what they know, and what they know is the British flag and the Queen, isn't it? So this is why we're having a return to these ideas, man. It's because no one has been able to give us a good alternative. And this is where we disagree, I think, with Corbyn, because I think in 2017 Corbyn gave us a good alternative, a nationalising agenda where we would try and remove some of the privatisation. But one of the problems with this is it did have socialist undertones, and it's a dangerous, dirty
and
word,
identitarian. He went on TV and uses pronouns. Who's going to want to vote for him doing that?
Okay, I'll give you that. I do agree with the fact that the vast majority of people in this country couldn't give a shit about pronouns. I don't give a shit about pronouns. Like, it doesn't matter how someone addresses you. I mean, just if you want to be addressed with something, tell someone your name, for God's sake. Don't like go into some like meltdown because someone has gendered you incorrectly. And I mean, being a bit harsh now.
Good. Let the hate flow through you.
If you've made your gender deliberately obtuse, if you look like a combination between a woman and a man, people are going to fucking misgender you because they're not sure. So they're just going to make an assumption, trying to be polite instead of going, "Oh, are you there?" And if you kick off at them, you've got no one to blame but yourself, really. You've got to take responsibility for your own interactions in society, haven't you? You can't go around being gender neutral and then getting annoyed when someone takes a guess. It's not fair on the over-socialized, is it? I suppose they're not even the over-socialized. They're lightly socialized.
I completely agree with that, and that's what I'm trying to get over, is that it's such bad electioneering policy to say to people, hang on, you're all racist, you're all misogynistic, you're all bigots. Clive Lewis said that racism was to blame for the reason people voted for Brexit. Honestly, Clive, mate, if you're listening, how is that going to attract people to your party? Especially when the main polled reason for voting for Brexit is that people believe that the decisions of the country should be made solely in Westminster. Now, you can disagree with that or agree with that all you like, but let's not also forget the large minority of black and Asian people who also voted to leave.
That's true, isn't it? Yeah, there's a big push. I mean, because they're more traditionally conservative, ironically, isn't it? Because they are what usually self-made, so they're usually a business-minded. I mean, this is an extreme generalization now, but a lot of first and second generation immigrants are self-made people, aren't they? They have to be. They have to fight against call it the traditional racism of the working class, because there was, and to some extent is, examples of that in society still. I mean, when I'm not saying we have institutional racism, that's wrong. The ideas of critical race theory are bollocks, and we can easily disprove them in another podcast. But these people who come in the 1960s, 70s, they've had to work hard, and so they vote Tory because the Tories promised to let them keep hold of their wealth, essentially. You know, I would argue that what the Tories say and what they give us are two completely different things, but that's something for that's almost a different analysis, because first of all, we've got to get them out of power as far as I'm concerned. And if we're going to replace them with anything, it can't be the left-leaning identitarian Labour Party right now, because they don't even have any policies, do they? Like, have you even heard any of Keith Starmer's policies? Like, Keith, I mean,
they're the same. They are, a lot of them are just the same as Corbyn's, but that's what I mean as well. You're right. Like, what is the alternative at the minute? I think you're spot on there with saying that people see the Conservatives, for whatever reason, whether it is like Dominic Cummings, safe pair of hands.
I think the dissonance in the electorate and even in the media is obscene with this, though, because the only reason they're a safe pair of hands is because they are managing the decline of capitalism. They're not doing anything for us, not really. I'll give them furlough, but the reason for furlough is totally selfish in terms of why they gave it to us. It's to stop their own consumer-based economy falling to pieces. And I know we're all in the same economy together, but they're on the top of the rung. So for them to pay people furlough, it's nothing to do with helping out the general public and helping Joe Public. It's not that at all. It's to support the corporations and their consumer-based systems. So
I don't know. I think we should make a really important point here, is that in politics, I think there are some really decent, like, moral, hard-working people, even MPs on both sides. And I think there has to be MPs in there who really do care about people. But there's probably a very small minority of that, and it's probably not very popular. And actually, I worked in a pub, and I was going to try and become a Liberal Democrat MP. And one of the guys who kept coming along was like, yeah, he should be an MP. And I was like, oh, yeah, I've got some great ideas about nationalisation. He was like, whoa there, big boy. Now, you've got to play the game if you want to get in, because if you're not part of the big boys club, forget it. Like, these new ideas are extremely hard to get to the top. So when we think of like Brexit, let's give some black voices some airtime here. And I've also got some quotes here from black people who voted for Brexit.
Okay.
Which I'd like to hear your analysis on and see what you think, because it sort of turns the narrative around. So the first is a 20-year-old student in London. And he said, I would argue that Remain voters are just as racist when you consider that the majority of the EU is white, yet they do not want non-EU immigration. They do not mind refugees coming in, though, since it allows their virtue signaling to continue and show how not racist they are. What do you think about that? That's a Jermaine, a 21-year-old student in London.
That is interesting, isn't it? There is some facts in that, isn't it? Because the Conservative government of the day have done a deal, haven't they, where we're going to get a large influx of economic migrants from India now, aren't we? This is where we're going to get you could call it disposable labour in a way. I mean, this is all to do with globalisation as well. But go back to the quote. It is interesting.
India is long been our close ally. And actually, there's something to say on that.
It's a bit of a stretch. You can't really call India our long-term ally, because we used to ran it with an iron fist. We might share some of the same like legal codes and things like that, but I mean, in terms of being allies, I think that's a big stretch, man. Like, they tolerate our presence in elite dining functions and stuff like these Davos type environments, but I wouldn't call us allies, man. I mean, we killed millions of their citizens during like our oppressive reign of their country.
Isn't that a bit reductionist to sort of rely on something that happened in history? Why can we not?
It's not very long ago, mate. It's only 70 years ago.
But why can't we call them allies?
It's a single lifetime, because we're not. Like, it's a single lifetime. We're business partners. We're not allies. Like, we sell them weapons that they can use against people in Kashmir, or their government uses against people in Kashmir. We're not allies. An ally defines to me some sort of, you work together and you
aren't we
fight
working together? When we send lots of aid over to India, is that not working together?
Not really, no. I mean, they pay us for most of that stuff, and they send people here to work who then send money back to their country. That's not the same.
Isn't that working together?
No, I don't think so. But we're going off on cross purposes.
Yeah, we are. So you might disagree then with what Abdul Turay said, who was a candidate for Brexit Party. And he said this, and it relates to the Commonwealth. And it's interesting, you see it like that, and yet he sees the Commonwealth as something completely differently. So he says, I have seen the way the EU and the political elites have behaved since Britain voted to leave, and I now realize the EU is a flawed project, which is fundamentally undemocratic in nature. The EU has been hijacked by big corporations, political elites like David Lammy, and billionaires who are using it to exploit and control the lives of ordinary working people. Britain turned its back on the Commonwealth when we joined the European Union. We now have a chance to rebuild historic ties with our friends, he continued. And his family came from the Commonwealth, Windrush. So the European Union was built for the benefit of European people. It was not built for the benefit of Caribbean, African, or Asian people. We came to Britain from the Commonwealth, not from Europe. My own family was part of the Windrush generation who settled here in Britain and joined the European community as it was then. But Britain turned its back on the Commonwealth when it joined Europe. It turned its back on us. We must leave this corrupt club. How does staying in the EU even benefit black people? That's interesting, isn't it?
I do agree with some of his
dissonance
opinion, but I don't agree with his, because he makes a point, doesn't he, that the European Union is a corrupt club, essentially, isn't it? That does nothing for his tribe, I guess, is what he's saying there. Yeah. But the problem I have with that statement as a whole, is he doesn't seem to understand that the people running this country and other non-EU affiliated countries are equally in this corrupt club. This is always my main problem with people who voted leave, whose reasoning is based around the fact that they think that the European Union, and to be honest, I think that we should call it the IMF European Union, because this is the main problem here. It's the
neoliberalism.
It's the International Monetary Fund Union is the problem here. It's not necessarily the individual sort of MPs in the European Parliament, MSPs, although they are also corrupt hangers-on ultimately.
However, you've got to extend that to our own politicians then.
Of course.
But that's fine then.
Problem ultimately is a problem we always come back to on the dissonance track, is the layer of politics on the sort of the top of the pyramid, is socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. So those in the top, those in the top rungs of our society, they have everything paid for because they either inherit money or they get expenses paid or they join the speaking club. Look at Tony Blair. After he left office, he became a public speaker. That's what Boris Johnson does. I mean, he called a £300,000 a year salary peanuts. Like these people, they exist in a completely different plane of existence to the average working class man that we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast. So Abdul Turay has made the same mistake that many people make, and he has assumed. Well, this is my opinion. This isn't a fact. He has equated the modern Conservative Party and the Brexit Party as being on the side of the working man. It's a complete misnomer. It's not true at all as far as I'm concerned. They're on their own side. They're on the side of their tribe, which is the elite a London bourgeoisie. Like Khalid Mahmood said, like the top of the Labour Party, they're all part of the same corrupt, money-grabbing bunch of elitists, aren't they? They're what we call the predatory governing class. And they might not all be as bad as each other. And I can see that, like you said, that there will be some in amongst that governing class who still, in some way, have these idealistic views and who really do want to help people. But they are in the minority. And that is, we have to be clear on that as far as I'm concerned, because otherwise, why is our country and our world so unequal? Because if more people listen to the morals that they might have had when they first came into politics, then we would have a more equal society, but we don't. And the reason is because once they get there, they think, well, this is all right. I quite like living like this, so I'm not going to change anything. And that's a gross oversimplification, obviously. But I think this is the main problem here, is that both the IMF European Union and the Conservative Party and the Labour Party and Narendra Modi and the Indian Hindu Nationalist Party and all these other units of political governance, yeah, they're all in it for themselves. They have a system at the top which helps them, and it doesn't really help anyone else because we're just disposable consumer workers. Yeah, we're just cogs in the machine, man.
One little thing you said that Abdul Turay, I agree he's filled with dissonance because he's saying the EU has turned its back on us and we must leave this corrupt club. How does staying in the EU even benefit black people? Right? That's not true because the EU undeniably benefits countries in terms of spending. Look at Ireland, for example, like the amount of money that's been pumped in it, that is undeniable. However, who he is siding with is the majority of the working class who did vote Brexit. Now, whether or not Abdul Turay or Nigel Farage or anyone else who voted Leave and campaigned on it like Boris Johnson does have, like anyone else who voted Leave's individual interests at heart, I doubt it. However, they are siding, though, with the majority of the working class who voted for Brexit. But I'd agree with you for their own interests, not necessarily as some kind of like righteous representative of all working people. And I think you're spot on there. I suppose it's very hard to sort of claim, well, I am here for the working class, and yet I take away a big fat wage home.
Difficult, isn't it? Going back a few years now I say a few years, I wasn't even alive then, I don't think. This is obviously I wasn't alive in the 70s and 80s. There were two union managers, I don't know, well, they were heads of these big transport unions in Britain, and they gave their salaries to union members. Yeah, they took a very small stipend because they were fairly well off. And I was having this argument with actually one of our listeners. I don't know if he'll listen this week. It might be too much for him already. But I was having this argument the other week about Corbyn, interestingly, and he's a Corbyn supporter, and that's fair enough. But the argument I put to him was that Corbyn lives in a nice house in London,
and was brought up in a rich family home.
Yeah, it's well off, So to me, if he was really, really serious, like he's a good MP, I'll give him that, really good MP. And I like his policies, I like his policies. But if he was really serious, about being a socialist leader, he would give his salary away, he would sell his expensive London home, he would drive around in a Volkswagen Beetle, like hybrid, whatever, or he would cycle. I mean, he does use public transport, so I'll give him that, But the fact that he still lives in this really, like this house probably worth about 4 million quid or something now, and the fact that he still takes his salary says to me that despite all of his good intentions, he has become as hopelessly trapped as the rest of the MPs because he's just got used to living like an MP. And my friend who listens will probably disagree quite severely with that, but that's how he lives. And compare him to, say, the president of... Is it the president of Uruguay?
I was just about to bring him up. Your friend who's listening, the day Jeremy Corbyn starts acting like Jose Mujica, who's the former president of Uruguay, who gave all his salary to charities, he lived on a tiny farm in the middle of nowhere, and he drove an old VW Beetle, then I will be right behind.
That shows you are absolutely 100% serious about changing the corrupt nature of modern politics, doesn't it?
And until that day, I'm sorry, like to your friend out there, I get it. Because like I said, I joined the Labour Party for Jeremy Corbyn. And like the other friend you mentioned there who noticed all the infighting, as soon as I went into, I remember one meeting going in there and one of the guys got up who had pink hair. Nothing wrong with that.
Man. Sorry, man. It's brilliant. Corin.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's very nice. And he said, we can't discuss our Brexit line. And I said, hang on a minute.
It's quite important.
Yeah.
That's very Stalinistic, isn't it, though? Like, it's very, like, Politburo, like, esque, isn't it? Where some things are off the table. They can't be discussed. And
it's going to lose us the election. We need to talk about it. I think that's a really good point, actually, is that Jeremy Corbyn is excellent, I'd say. Like Diane Abbott is an excellent MP for their respective constituents. However, when it comes to sort of putting their money where their mouth is, actually, how much money of their salary, of their 78k, do they really need? Plus expenses, etc., etc. I think that's when we look at the EU as well. We can see this dissatisfaction with the average sort of working person. When they look at someone like Jean-Claude Juncker, who was like imbibed in corruption, ex-banking president of Luxembourg, who would be better to know about real world issues than someone like that? His expertise included tax evasion, making stupid comments about borders being a bad invention, although I'm sure like he's got a nice safe gated mansion. And as well as like speaking favorably about arguably one of the most controversial political figures ever, like Karl Marx, who openly advocated for like a global red terror. Again, like it comes back to you, like
it's their actions as well, man, isn't it? Look at the IMF's actions in Greece, man, where they essentially destroyed an entire country simply to get their corporate business pals' money out. But I think when we're talking about Corbyn a minute ago, it is also important that we mention the media coverage, man. We have a serious problem in late stage capitalism, and that is that where in the post-war period, our media was a lot more neutral, and it was a lot more TV media anyway, because news was only on for about an hour a day, wasn't it? Yeah. So they gave you the facts. Yeah. They gave you a breakdown of what happened, and there wasn't a lot of political commentary, and those kind of shows were separate. Yeah, there was like Tonight with Robin Day, I think, was like a 1960s show where he would literally just grill different politicians on like their stances and stuff, and there was a lot more analysis. Yeah, but it was done professionally and separate to the rolling 24-hour news media. And now, because news is an entertainment profile, yeah, we have to have this angle, and I think that the news media in this country, especially the Murdoch empire, is in bed with the Conservative Party. Yeah, they have financial ties, they have family ties, they have business ties. Yeah, with the Conservative Party.
So do the Labour Party on a lesser level, but they do
but the Blairite wing. Yeah, this is a difference. Yeah, now because of the civil war in the Labour Party, the left nationalist, nationalisation, more socialist leaning side, yeah, doesn't have any media support yet. And we've discussed this before. Do you remember the little red hat that the BBC gave Corbyn, and they superimposed him in front of the Kremlin? Yeah. This is part of the problem, man, because we don't have a serious analysis anymore, is that the policies almost get lost in the sort of the circus and the spectacle. I mean, look at America, man. Like, look at the way that their elections are run there, and the spectacle and the TV coverage is bonkers. It's just another product in capitalism. Like,
you have got all those issues. You're quite right, and the way he was treated by the media was quite frankly disgusting. But like I said, in the real world, like take the media aside, go to a Labour Party meeting and then get told you're not allowed to discuss Brexit.
Yeah,
you don't need
of course.
Media spin on that. That is shit.
Yeah, of course. There's always two sides in there, and they all coalesce into this horrendous time we find ourselves living in.
Yeah, and because when I was in the party, I wanted to talk about actually how the EU imposed austerity on Greece and rejected their 2015 no vote.
And forced the Irish to vote twice.
And forced the Irish to vote twice. Forced the Irish to vote twice on the Lisbon Treaty. In Greece, they pushed through a higher pension age on them and higher taxes.
It led to the increase in support for Golden Dawn, the fascist party, as a direct result of the European Union meddling in the financial affairs. And obviously the Greeks hadn't done very well with their fiscal policy to begin with, but that was the fault of the late stage capitalists supporting politicians.
After the Lisbon Treaty, there was one Brussels official described the Irish as ungrateful bastards.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd have to look that up, man, but that's nuts.
The president of the EU is paid €27,000 a month.
What? Well, to Boris Johnson, man, that's peanuts. Peanuts, 27,000 a month. I can't support my 5 kids with that.
So I think the media do play a part too powerful, and we've spoke about that before. It's like, if we have a rational centrist government, what do we do about the media? Because if you curtail media rights, well, that's the pathway to fascism. So it's very tricky to get right. If you think about some of the left-wing newspapers during Brexit, for example, they sort of made out that the people who voted for Brexit, that the primary working class proponents for leave were A, uneducated, B, didn't know what they were voting for, C, would probably change their mind if given the chance, and D, branded as racist simply for supporting the Leave campaign.
I think out of those 4, the only one of those that's true is B, they didn't know what they voted for. And I think that's still true, because
I don't know, it's a bit condescending.
I don't know. But who knows what we voted for, mate? Because there's nothing, we haven't voted for anything. All we really voted for was the loss of $1 trillion worth of investment in the UK and some minor changes to our laws. We still don't really know what the actual outcome of Brexit. And I think that I've changed my tune on Brexit to some degree. I think we should be trying to make a go of it now. It is something that we should be trying to spin more positively. We can't do anything about it now. We've made the decision, and it's going to be at least 20 years until we're in a position where we can seriously think, well, has this been a success or not? But we need to have a direction, man. And this is where we differ, I think, because I don't think the Tory party in any version of its of its leadership reshuffles in the last decade or so, because we've had Cameron, we've had May, we've had Johnson, we'll probably have Gove in like a year or so. Yeah, none of these leaders don't really know where they're going with Brexit. I mean, all they really wanted to do ultimately is not pay a taxation. Probably there was a law, wasn't there, that essentially was the EU has introduced, which they probably won't use properly, but they did attempt to curtail the use of offshore accounts here. And this isn't something that's very popular with the predatory governing class here. So I think that was their primary aim, was to avoid this law. Yeah. But secondary to that, they're not really sure what they want to do with it other than use it as a tool, as an electioneering tool, which is part of how capitalism works.
I think you raise a really good point, actually, that like if anyone does even think that the Tories have our best interest in art and that they are the best thing at the minute, yeah, that's fair enough. And I think you're right to bring that up. The problem there is that give electorate a decent alternative. And quite frankly, when you have like a party based on all the stuff we've mentioned above, who believe that people who vote for Brexit, people who voted for breakfast are uneducated, don't know what they were voting for, were branded as racist, etc. And then when it comes to election, they go, please, sir, please vote for me now. Yeah. So, No! You're living in a different world. And on the subject of like racism, while we're sort of on it, I mean, I think we both agree, if you're a racist, you need to seek medical help immediately. It makes no rational sense whatsoever.
We've disproven, eugenics has been disproven. There is no such thing as a superior race. So
all our descent is African.
Yeah, Homo sapiens wiped out the Neanderthals, and they were caught in something called a Bosrupian trap. It's something to do with population size not being large enough to basically warrant a technological change. There was no innovation, so they died out from a mixture of that and probably genocidal practices from the Homo sapiens. We're going off on a mad tangent. I agree, man. Like, racism is retarded. Like, there's no excuse for it.
This is where it comes into when we're talking about Labour Party, right? If you're going to be a party that is claiming that others voted for racist reasons, then you better be squeaky clean, and
you better be able to prove that those people voted because they were out and out racist as well.
And they can't.
It's anecdotal, isn't it?
Well, here's what it comes down to. Like, if you're going to act like ultra zealous right wing and claim to have like the moral high ground enough to condescend working class voters and call them racists and sort of propagate critical race theory, for example, well, I think if you read into the EHRC document on anti-Semitism, quite frankly, Corbyn, although like a good local MP, did a terrible job, and he presided over illegal activity, and the evidence is concrete and correlates with their own internal report in 2016. Just to go into this bit, just to back this up, like if your mate is still listening, who maybe not now, this is going to induce some serious dissonance, mate. So
it's inducing dissonance in me, man, because I've already got an argument brewing for.
That's good, and I'm glad you have. I'm glad you have. But whether we like it or not, the independent report on anti-Semitism, some of the interesting points that stood out in particular, it isn't just that there was anti-Semitism in the party. It was also the withholding of some of the people who are involved in the cases. So one example where there was the NCC's decision in 2019 to expel a member of the Labour Party, but it didn't have any detail about the decision-making process behind it. So there's a bit of unfairness there, I'd say, to some of the members who are embroiled on that. That's the first thing it found. So that's anti-Semitism aside, the party is just badly run when it comes to disciplinary hearings. Now, that's one of the first things. And this is despite one of the hearings proceeding in the member's absence, and the legal team had left, right? What's going on there?
Okay.
So that's important.
That's pretty dodgy, isn't it?
Why is that happening in the Labour Party? So is that squeaky clean? No, it's not. Next, in the leaked report, so there are allegations that the Labour Party's internal review identified at least 170 complaints in the period from November 2016 to February 2018 that were not acted on, investigated, or anything. And the total figure was likely much higher. That not the sort of people I want in government, I'm afraid. And again, let's not rule that the Tories are just guilty of that. They've had claims about bullying, etc. But then again, the Tories aren't sort of claiming to be this moralistic high ground that everyone better not be a racist, So the next one here, a leaked report says that from November 2016 to February 2018, there were only 24 notices of investigation in relation to anti-Semitism, and that this was due to a lack of complaint. But it goes on. that Jenny Formby gave evidence to us that the Labour Party response to the growth in anti-Semitism complaints for 2015 was, for a long period, inadequate. Shortcomings are apparent in many aspects of the party's responses. And this is an independent report, bear in mind, that Labour paid them to do. So our procedures themselves were over-elaborate. Complaints were handled inefficiently with often inexplicable delays. At times, tension in the party meant that staff were distracted from their core tasks of managing the complaints and disciplinary processes, excuses, internal political disputes. So, yeah, the party and Jeremy Corbyn, when he was sort of removed, did deserve to be investigated. And if this was me or you, Gav, in our day jobs, and we didn't handle a complaint properly or showed due care, we'd be fired.
Due diligence, isn't it?
It is. I've got one last point. Sorry, because I know.
All right.
And I'll give you some examples of the racism that was detailed in the report. If to your friend listening and to you, Gav, I suggest you read it. If you don't like it, well, it's facts. We're talking about empirical data.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the examples of racism included that the conduct of a member against another member was anti-Semitic. And this is because they expressed no remorse and suggested, and listen to how ridiculous this is, the person who was being racist suggested that the complainant, who was Jewish, should be held responsible for the entire actions of the Israeli government. What? No! So in 2018, the NEC, they gave this member a formal warning and continued their administrative suspension for like another year. But the member was given this caveat that if they didn't attend training by a recognized provider, re-education, whatever you want to call it, or just like, don't be such a dick and trying to hold someone who happens to be Jewish as accountable for the actions of their nation. And they said, if they did this sort of training, then the suspension would be lifted automatically. However, here's where the Labour Party also failed, is that no training was ever provided. So they didn't even give them the chance. So they have this whole sort of outline.
No restitution.
There's no restitution.
Yeah.
I need to be really clear about this. This isn't mixing anti-Zionism or pro-Palestinian values. This alludes to this emotive bullying where someone blankets an entire people as responsible for the actions of its government in the same way we're being lambasted, or people from this country being lambasted for colonialism, for the potential crimes of our ancestors, right? It's wrong and it's anti-scientific, right? So there are elements of the party that are sadly racist. And of course, this will apply to like any group of people who, or party in contrasting ways. But my point here, and to your friend, listen to you, Gav, and like, oh, this is really what I want. Labour can do better. I expect better from Labour in the same way when I read The Guardian, I read it because I expect better from them.
You make a good argument, to be honest with you. You make a good argument as to the bureaucratic failings and the moral failings of the Labour Party. I do have one sort of caveat to that. And I do agree that it's ridiculous that we expect a single person of a singular faith to take responsibility for the actions of their entire nation or faith. What I would say is that with anti-Semitism, some of the problems of this do actually come from the actions of the state of Israel. And we have to be aware of this because, this is in the news now, isn't it? They are again fighting, and there are some interesting, the brief history of Israel is probably quite helpful there. If no one really understands like why the Middle East is such a shit tip at the moment, is because after the war, the Western allies and their guilt complex shipped out the survivors of the Holocaust and put them into what was then a British protectorate, which was Palestine. And over the years, and there's been 3 or 4 different wars, the militarized Israelis have expanded the area of their state, created a larger state of Israel than what was originally agreed in the 1946 settlement, or was it the 1967? I forget which one, but they've expanded their state massively. Yeah. So the issue is with the Labour Party, I remember one of the problems was that Corbyn, and I think quite rightly this year, refused to sign up to the Israeli definition of anti-Semitism. Now, I don't think that is a racist or anti-Semitic decision here, because the Israeli definition of anti-Semitism was, at that time, I don't know if it's changed now, this is a couple of years ago now, they might have brushed this under the carpet, or they may have got enough signatories to make this legal, at least in the United Nations. Their definition of anti-Semitism was anything that criticised the policy of the government of the State of Israel. So that in itself is an insane idea, because that means that they can just do whatever they want, and anyone having a problem with that. Anyone saying, well, you probably shouldn't be blowing the limbs off Palestinian children. Oh, you're anti-Semitic, you're anti-Semitic. And I think that's part of the problem here. And I guess in the Labour Party, the problem I would assume arose when Corbyn took this line is that emboldened those with genuine anti-Semitic views in the party to essentially be open about their
possibly
hatred. And I think we can also relate this to Brexit, because there is a small minority, as you said, in every group and tribe here that does hold these backwards views here, these views that have no place in modern society. And the problem with Brexit is because the way that the right-wing media has spun Brexit, and they've played on the culture wars and the fears of immigration and stuff like that, they've emboldened this tiny percentage of vocal racist people to come out and be more vocal. So you've had an increase in reported attacks on people of ethnic minorities from people who have used Brexit as an excuse to justify their behavior. So I think this is very important, is that we look at this through a lens of rationality. And it's the same with anti-Semitism, because we cannot say that the state of Israel is behaving in a morally acceptable way, in the way that it essentially treats the Palestinians as 3 million prison camp members, doesn't it? It just shuts them in a small area, cuts off their electricity, keeps them partially starved, keeps them without decent medical care. And the reason for that is because they want control of the territory that they inherited at the end of the Second World War. And there's no bones about it.
Here's my problem with like anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and to an extent to what you've just said. I went to Israel. It's like an enigma. It was amazing and like scary at the same time. But the problem I have with people in the Labour Party who constantly go on about is that I think Israel is just bullied. It's seen as an easy target. Why aren't they concentrating on the United Arab Emirates? Why is it always Israel? They're just easy targets who have had a time. Like 6 million people got killed in the Holocaust. I think that people just use them as a way to bully, and they're an easy target.
Yeah, but a minute ago, about half an hour ago, you said we should be worrying about something that happened 75 years ago. So why are you worried about the Holocaust now? I mean, like you said, it was a long time ago, man. So surely we can just move on from that now, and we should move on to the fact that they are committing genocide against another.
But so are we. Where's this consistent approach in the Labour Party? There's no complaints of like against the British government who are committing genocide in Yemen. So why is it always Israel? That's what I'm saying. Where's the condemnation for Egypt?
Israel,
where's the Labour Party's condemnation of China? So do you know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, maybe there is. Maybe there was a condemnation of the Chinese government. I don't know.
Very quiet. Where's the condemnation of the United Arab Emirates and their treatment of Yemen?
I wouldn't call Israel an easy target, though, man. I mean, they're the most heavily armed state in the Middle East, man. They're given billions of dollars in equipment and arms by America each year, man. They're not really an easy target as such. I mean, if anything, Israel is probably the most powerful militarized nation state in the area. So we should view this in a rational lens, man, because they are committing war crimes right now on a regular basis. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be defending their territory. Yeah, of course we are.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
but we're both acknowledging that. And I guess what my point is that, and your point is this as well, isn't it? That Labour should definitely acknowledge that, but
be more consistent. I just want consistency.
We could also go, when we talked about electioneering earlier, didn't we? It's a very poor election strategy to blame British manufacturing businesses for war in Yemen. Even if it's true, it's a difficult sell, isn't it? And this is where we come back to the media issue, is that politics and the media, they're so intertwined that we need to separate them out, man. We need to separate the lies from the facts. I see this more and more now in the way that the BBC and other large conglomerates cover elections and they cover them. I mean, look at the corruption of the Conservative Party now. Yeah, I mean, there has been a big furore over Boris Johnson's use of public funds to decorate his flat. And fair enough, there's actually been covered quite a lot, but there's this reluctance, isn't there, to just out and out say, well, he's corrupt. And he is. And that's the problem. And people in the media have this reticence to say that because they're dependent on the Tory party for their stories and their leaks and this sort of thing. So
and if they call out Bojo, then they have to sort of say, well, actually, the whole of Parliament's corrupt.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not going to do that.
Themselves corrupt. Yeah,
you don't bite the hand
right,
that feeds you. Like, so exactly. It's like if we look at like the media and like Trump's sort of careless tirades and like insensitive attacks on his political opponents, that left like a bitter taste in like the mouths of many people, like including me and like lots of people we know, like both left and right. Actually, I'm looking at Labour, I suppose, in a bit of a vacuum, but I really believe like they should be better than that. There's actually another report that's just got quashed in the Labour Party about anti-black racism. This is like very recently, and they're shelving it indefinitely. Who in their right mind, in their right rational mind, would want to elect someone like the mayor, the former Labour Mayor Sheila Oakes, who commented on Boris's time in intensive care with the words, "Sorry, he completely deserves this." Why is it all right for Labour to say that, but then try and call out for when Trump says something just as horrible? Why would the working classes want to be associated with the Labour voters who wish death upon their opposition? Is that rational? I don't think so. So, like, to sum up my tirade, like, we've got this party that bullies white van men, like calls the unrighteous thick and racist, has its own internal issues with racism. And let's bring up some more empirical observations into this. All of this correlates with poor election history over the last 15 years. And after each loss, this is where it gets quite interesting, is they then release these like internal reports, Guardian articles, and they all have these familiar and fatigued headline each time, as if it's some great surprise or piece of esoteric knowledge, right? And these coincide with a countless studies released that all match up to this issue. And this is what it comes down to. If you Google, anyone listening now, put in Labour working class, and here's just some articles that might pop up. There's a pattern. 2013, Ed Miliband. Loss of less affluent voters cost Labour the election. 2015, Ed Miliband. Labour vows to protect the working classes. 2016, there's a fight over working class voters. Labour must not lose it. 2019, Labour's lost working class voters have gone for good. This is after the crumbling of the Red Wall, where, like I said, some of those Labour seats were held for over 100 years, turned blue. All right, let's go on with more internal reports and articles. 2019, an article by Jess Phillips. Working class voters didn't trust or believe in Labour. We have to change. 2021, 3 weeks before the election, former Labour chair, he prophetically warns that the party will lose the working class because they are turning their backs on them. 2021, Keir Starmer concedes Labour has lost the trust of the working class people. 3 days ago, people in Hartlepool state that Labour neglected the working class, etc., etc. Are they not getting the message yet? You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes, Gavin.
Yeah. Perhaps I'm Enola Holmes, man. Don't gender me. Don't gender my detectives.
Well, here's the icing on the cake for you, right? In the most recent election, which Labour got wrecked, right, locally, which we've discussed above, you had Chris Emmers Williams, who was an MP, who lost the Amber Valley seat, saying, and get this, and I quote, "The voters have let us down." How out of touch and utterly narcissistic is that? The day after, we have Angela Rayner saying that she vows to reconnect Labour with working class voters. So Labour, here's my message to Labour.
Clean up your room.
Tackle your own issues of racism. Yeah. I'm disappointed in you, Labour.
Make a good argument, man. When you lay out those articles like that, there's just the same message over and over, isn't it? Again, their policies aren't connecting, regardless of whether or not you think that's because of the hostile media environment or because of the fears of the electorate pushing them towards a safe pair of hands, as it were. Like, they should do better, shouldn't they? And I think that this is what we can come back to with Corbyn, is if you really want to make yourselves different and a good alternative to the crony corruption of the Tory party, then they need to be squeaky clean, don't they? They need to literally be the moral arbiters. They need to be like, we are your rational centrist moral guardians. Like, that's what I want to see. I want to see a distinct plan for nationalisation with a good budget that works, and I want to see a definite attack on the corruption of modern late-stage capitalist society, man. And to do that, you've got to be uncorruptible yourselves.
I think you're right, and you've like perfectly summed up basically what I ranted there. Is that is if you're going to take on corrupt people, you better not be corrupt yourself, and you better have
Because this is
clean bum time.
This is, I think, a couple of weeks ago that we were discussing an article that was going on about how all politicians are corrupt.
Yeah.
And this is a problem, isn't it? Because we don't see them as any different now, really, from the Tories. They don't have a leg to stand on.
Yeah.
And because their policies, like you said earlier, are generally the same, partly because the Tories have robbed the good policies, but partly because Labour haven't really thought outside of the box, then yeah, we just see them as another corrupt party. And if both parties are corrupt, the electorate's going to go, well, we'll just pick the ones that are doing okay, like in their general sense. Because even though our society is coming to a gradual halt, we've still got a roof over our heads. Food is still affordable, just. Petrol is just about affordable. The least maggoty biscuit, isn't it? That's the choice. It's a choice. It's a choice between a biscuit covered in dog shit and a biscuit covered in fucking sawdust, and we're just eating biscuit covered in sawdust, right?
I think that is spot on. Can we move on to
the dissonant meme review?
Yeah, of course, man. Let's. I want to see these memes. I'm looking forward to.
I
this
don't know.
week.
They're a bit tame. Here we go. Here's number one. It's very tame. It's very gentle. Like Jeremy Corbyn, Keith Starmer, if you're out there, Diane Abbott. Look,
Keith. Let's just call him Keith from now on. Yeah.
I know you've had a hard time, but honestly, like we just want what's best for you. You know, we're like disappointed parents here, right? Here we go. Meme number one.
So look, the British person who calls themselves working class staff. Right? So this is like, this is a mix, man. This is a bizarre mix of ideas here. Man. I'm not even sure where to start with this because the Jeremy Corbyn suggests that, I don't know, maybe this is right, because these are like capitalists who think they're socialists, don't they? Is this what this is trying to be? I'm not sure, really. This is a confusing meme for me, man. Like the tracksuit and the no, I don't know. Okay, now maybe I'm looking at the text now. I used to call people who wear these. Okay, I've missed the text completely. I was just looking at the images. Yeah, okay, this does make a lot more sense now. This is someone that thinks they're left wing but actually lives in a nice house in the suburb.
That sums it up, I think. This is
this
the bourgeoisie London elite. You know.
Yeah. This thing in the corner, this regards these people to be gammons and you check their privilege. Yeah, this is something I've seen before, where if you've got a job and you're white, then you're a gammon, according to some of these people, isn't it? And to be honest, I say I'm a reformed gammon abuser, I guess, because I used to comment on things like, "Oh, shut up, you gammons," and it is as bad when other people on the right say, "Oh, you commie, you bastard." Yeah, if we're going to have a rational debate, just don't call people gammons and don't call people loony lefties. That's the word I was thinking of. Yeah, loony lefty and gammon is the same sort of derogatory insult, isn't it?
I think I respect that. That is fair enough. And you're right, like ad hominem attacks don't lend anything to the rational debate. The Glastonbury festival tickets, what are they, like 300 quid? I've never been to Glastonbury.
Yeah, no.
I can never
wouldn't
afford
go
that.
Anyway. Bunch of bastards.
Loony lefties. Only joking. Right, meme number two.
So this goes back to the Khalid Mahmood's comments, doesn't it, about the bourgeoisie elite, because this is someone who is obviously a liberal, I guess, who wears a manufactured hammer and sickle t-shirt from China, probably made in a slave labor factory. And he's talking to a guy who works the land and who obviously appears to be religious in some way, has some interesting ideas on the Civil War, let's say. Yeah, this is the problem, isn't it? Just because someone flies a Confederate flag doesn't always mean they're a lunatic racist. It does sometimes.
Not
always. And the guy's face at the end says it all, doesn't he? Like, I'm not touching your hand. You've worked the land. I am a reformed champagne socialist in the fact that I definitely used to think like this. And I've moved away from this because it's narrow-minded, and you're trapping yourself in a dream of freedom, which isn't real. So,
and like most decent people, I think are working class. So it's in your best interest to say, I support the working class. But the problem is, it's like a very generalized term, isn't it? And when you get into the real world and you start meeting actual working class people who may not entirely agree with you and may say things that offend you, he's saying, well, that's great here. You know, I'm working class myself. And he's going, oh,
if there's things that they do, traditions that they have that you think are wrong, you need to explain that in a rational way. You don't
work around it.
Go, exactly. You need to compromise. You need to try and convince them that what they're doing isn't good for society as a whole. Yeah. So if they were waving a Confederate flag and going, the South will rise again, have a rational debate about them, about why you think that the South rising again would be a bad idea. And I think eventually, once you get past those opposing viewpoints, you might find some common ground there. So Yeah, I think that's quite a good meme actually for showing those ill-tempered dissonance conversations.
I once picked up a hitchhiker. Actually, I had a busy day of it. I was on my way to Wells to the Connect Center. I picked up like these three nuns, right? And he thought, "Oh, lucky you." No,
It's the start of a weird joke, man. But carry on here.
And like just dropped him off in Wells and like said cheerio. Like, and then on the way back, I picked up another hitchhiker guy who had quite bad BO. He wasn't homeless or anything, and he was a vegan. And we were sort of talking about politics. And I was saying, well, veganism is about upholding life and acknowledging that all life has value in order to have a better civilization. And he was saying, I don't know about that. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm sort of like a right-wing Nazi vegan.
Wow. Okay.
I said, oh, okay, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I believe that white people are sort of under threat. And I said, what makes you think that? How are white people under threat? And he couldn't answer. When he left the car, I don't know if I convinced him, etc., but I at least had a conversation with someone I completely disagree with in a way that isn't going to galvanize his position. He didn't go away and go, oh, I'm going to galvanize my views.
You didn't stop your car and go, get out, you filthy Nazi gammon. You asked him a question. So, yeah, I think that's important, isn't it? We've got to find a common ground with these. There's a film, isn't there? The documentary, not Social Network. It's I can't remember, it's some Netflix documentary which covers, and they interview the creators of the social media platforms that cause so much dissonance and problems now. And on it, the interviewee says, well, what do you think the future holds? And the guy literally thinks for a minute and he just goes, civil war. And that coming from a guy that created the platform is really eye-opening, I think, because even the creators now have realized that the things that they have made that help polarize these two opposing views of the world, it could likely, France, the generals have said that they could be looking at civil war in 20 years. And I guess they mean like more of a civil war in terms of civil unrest, I guess, that leads to like high levels of rioting and violence. We could see this in America already, man. Like this is already happening, man. And I think this meme kind of encapsulates that, isn't it? It's the fact that the two opposing sides who have hardened their views are unwilling to talk to each other a lot of the time.
And the media aren't like sort of giving hope that actually we should be doing that.
So they're doing the opposite, man. But the reason they're doing the opposite is to keep their predatory governing class system in operation.
So next meme, you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
This one's a bit more riskier.
Okay. I don't call this risky at all, man, because this is the typical bourgeois leftist now, isn't it? Typical rich person that says, or even a typical relatively, or even a consumer worker, I suppose. Let's not even bring wealth into this, because I know plenty of people who earn nothing that have these views here. And this boils down to the fact that the media have successfully portrayed Trump as a right-wing lunatic, and he has elements of that, but he's not completely bonkers. It sounds unusual for me, but this is a view I've come to over several years now, is that actually he's no better or worse than the corporations that support the Democrats currently. So, you look at things like Amazon and Starbucks, who have changed their social media profiles to a little black square, and Nike and places like that. And we're suddenly supposed to think, oh, they're great. They don't use slave labor in their sweatshops at all. They have really great environmentally positive business practices, and they don't. If Jeff Bezos released a quarter of his funds that he owns on the stock market, he could cure poverty overnight.
Amazing, isn't it, really? You're right. The bit for me is less about Trump, but more about this sort of Schrodinger's leftist who's saying, okay, I'm for the working class, and at the same time, I hate them because they're sort of racist. And what it comes down to is when we have like these groups of working class people or any sort of voters who get behind people it comes back to this, people we disagree with, so we might disagree with Trump, but whether we like it or not, there are working class groups of people who see something in him.
74 million people voted for Trump at the last election. Like, that's a lot of people, isn't it?
So if you're saying this again to anyone, and it was to me as well, because I used to be exactly the same. I'd go, I'm left, I'm working class, and as I say, I come from a working class background, and I was that too. I'm left wing and I support the working classes. But as soon as I met someone, I'm talking about maybe about 10 years ago, as soon as I met someone who said they were working class but had a different political view to my own, or who said, actually, I like Nigel Farage, I was like, what? I couldn't get it. And like, if you look at Nigel Farage and his appeal to working class, having a pint, swigging it, well, he's obviously appealing. So like, we've got to accept that. If we are truly for the working class, then we need to accept them, us, no matter what opinion they have, if we're going to synthesize and come together.
We're all going to be working class soon, man, anyway, because the middle class is being eliminated by inequality. So, yeah, we will all, there's only going to be two classes soon, isn't there? There's going to be the predatory governing class and everyone else.
Yeah.
So,
one more meme. It's not a good one, but yeah, just for the hell of it.
Yeah, this is something I have a problem with, actually, because free speech, should be just that. It should be completely free and uncensored, because people should be free to say what they want, and then others should be free to call them out on it.
Definitely.
So if someone says something racist, someone else would say, well, that's retarded, mate. This is why this is wrong. The idea that these tech corporations can somehow, like Facebook, can somehow police the argument is bollocks. The fact they've banned Trump from Twitter and Facebook, all it does is it creating a one-party system where the one-party state is a big tech corporation sponsored party. They don't give a shit what policies the Democrats or the Republicans have, as long as those policies let them continue exploiting the working class.
And what it does is it pushes like those people who do have different views underground, where they're going to be out. They're going to be angry. Imagine if you are on the right of the party, and all of a sudden your favorite leader is banned. Are you going to be happy or be more angry?
No, you're going to turn into Ted Kaczynski and start sending mail bombs, aren't you? But maybe this is deliberate, man. Maybe this is all part of the way that they're trying to create these frictions in society so they can create a police state. Like, I think this is all part of a grand idea that they're working on. And this is this grand, like, woke-topian idea that the right and I guess the totalitarian elements of the left are going towards, because they both want to be in charge and they both want to install their own crazy vision of late-stage capitalism.
Thing is, you say that about the right, but how come, like, I don't know if you saw the Queen's speech, but Tories are actually bringing into legislation a free speech law, which is going to fine universities if they don't allow their students to have free speech.
Yeah, I did see that. That is quite interesting, and I think that is quite a good idea. Let's see how far that goes. But I do also think that although a good policy, this is all part of the same strategy to make sure that they stay in power almost indefinitely, because they've redrawn the voting boundaries. There's something I read the other day about changes to the judiciary, which will make it very difficult for the opposition, whatever they may be in 10 or 15 years, whatever, to challenge government decisions. And I think we should be careful not to give them too much credit for policies which basically are designed to keep their hegemony of power intact. Like, this is all this for. This is what we come back to earlier about there being people in government who have the best interests of the general population at heart, and those that only have their own interests. And I think ultimately, because of the way that neoliberalism has developed over the last 50 years, the primary function of government now is to keep itself in power. It's not to better the lives of those underneath it. They'll do enough to keep us alive and not starving to death, because that's what they need in order to keep order. But they won't do anything. They're not really going to do anything that's going to liberate us from the chains of the narrow dream of negative freedom that we're in. So
but maybe we've got to do a lot of that ourselves as well. But I take your point. And like, so if we finish round this up, then if you could speak directly to Keith Starmer right now, and I'll be Keith Starmer.
Okay.
And,
hi, Captain. Yeah, what would you like to say to me? Okay, right, sure.
Well, Keith, I'd like you to resign, to be honest with you, because you're just terrible.
I don't think I need to do that.
You don't have any policies. Like, what are your policies on nationalising the rail infrastructure?
Captain, that is a great question. I think we've got to look to the future without being afraid to look at the past, all right? You know what I mean?
No, I don't, actually. Could you elaborate, Keith? See, you haven't actually given me any policies there.
Elaborate vis-a-vis, if you look ipso facto more, then if you look into what we have done, I think you'll be quite pleased, all right?
Well, Keith, I'm not sure I agree with your policies on giving trans-libertarian immigrants from Mars the vote. I'm not sure that they should be given the vote. Sorry, I'm going off on a complete misnomer.
What we need to look at is not what we're doing, but why and who, all right?
Shut up, Keith. Just shut up. What he sounds like, though, isn't it? Yeah, you're right, man. He is.
Well, it's
fun.
all
He's humorous
politicians.
side.
All politicians do that. So they give you these double-ended on. But seriously, if you could say something to Keith Starmer now,
Ping bang bottle. Yes, Brexit. Yes.
In all seriousness, though, if you could deliver a message now to Keir Starmer and your hope or vision or want, what would you say to him now? What would your advice be?
Well, I think probably what you said earlier is probably quite a good place to start, man. They need to tidy the room. They need to stop fighting, and they need to agree on a direction that they're going to go in as a opposition party. And I think they need to abandon both the Blairite idea of becoming electable just to be elected, and they also need to abandon the socialist idea of hammer and sickle for everyone. Yeah, somewhere in there is a electable government. Every time I say this, though, I always have to say as a caveat to the end, even if Keith managed to create a viable opposition, we have to sort out the media in this country. We have to get rid of the Murdoch empire. We need to break up all of these large media companies. I think we should just get rid of fucking all of the newspapers completely and start
Hitler would
again.
love that.
I think, but they're all rotten, man. We need to start again, and we need to. Well, I'm not saying
the Bridgewater Mercury's all right.
We just need to start again. With our
it got me thinking. Like maybe the anarchists are sort of right. Like for rational centrism to ever be a thing, maybe we do need like a mass extinction event to reset it.
Well, this is an interesting topic of conversation. Maybe we should leave this till next time.
I'd finish with, Keir Starmer. Like, I think, again, you're probably an all right, decent bloke. You're at the Queen's Council. You're obviously a morally kind of sensible, like, bloke. But, like Gav said, this is like I'm having a phone call with Keir now. But like Gav said, you have got to work somehow to unite the party. Thing is, me and you, Gav, I'm not sure how do you do that? Yeah, it's a big job.
Might have to split into two.
I sort of feel for him in that regard. But we'll say ta-ra for now. If you've been listening and you've been upset or happy or not sure or dissonant, hopefully, let us know, like, especially if you disagree.
Ta-ra for now, and we'll see you next time.
Ta-ra, bye!